Hello, good afternoon for most of us, morning for some of us. Good as always to be joined by Joel Searby. A few minutes late, Joel, because we have so much going on right now.
That's right. That's right. Hey, I love that theme, that video, the donkey and the elephant battling it out, and then the ram just rises out of the ashes, and there we are. Good to be with you all today. Looking
Yeah,
forward to this
yeah,
conversation.
it always gets me pumped up, and I hope I'm not the only one, just because I kind of produced it. It's like my favorite thing ever. But I'm glad you at least appreciate it as well. Joel, we don't have a lot of time because you're super busy. I'm super busy. And that's good news because, as I said, we've got a lot going on. So let's just kick off with kind of the first big thing that we started. And that is we launched this week in Arizona a new initiative called Republicans for Mark Kelly.
Yeah, it's a big week, and I'll say at the outset here, if you're watching live, feel free to drop in comments or questions. We can see those, and we'd love to answer your questions while we're on here. We've said at Renew America we're going to go do some stuff, right? But every political group says they're going to go do some stuff, and it's really gratifying for us to be able to really say we are doing the stuff, and we have launched Republicans from Mark Kelly in Arizona. We've got a great Arizona team and supporters in place, and that's only going to grow. So if you're in Arizona or you know people in Arizona, join us in that effort. We believe that this is a critical cycle for principled Republicans and conservative independents and center-left Democrats to join together in what we call coalition campaigning, cross-partisan, not bipartisan, cross-partisan. All people are welcome. But we've got to stand up for some of these really crucial, democracy-defining races, and we're doing that in Arizona to support Captain Mark Kelly, who is really a true American patriot. I think there's a number of candidates running this year that are patriots in all of the most wonderful ways, and that doesn't just mean service to the country, though that is a key part of it as someone in the armed forces. But unfortunately, there's people who served in the armed forces who are running on totally fabricated lies. And so that's dangerous too. What we need is people who are both committed to the truth and have a demonstrated history of really serving this nation selflessly. So really excited about launching Republicans for Mark Kelly in Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in early days when we were kind of looking at who are the candidates that we really want to get behind, who have earned their stripes and earned their way into our endorsement. And Mark Kelly was one of those that was kind of a no-brainer from the start, right? Like, you just look at not only his career, as you pointed out, prior to his Senate service, but even what he's done in the Senate so far. He's kind of one of those people, very fitting for Arizona, who stands high on principle. So just a thrill to launch this for him. I'm actually going to play on that note. I'm going to play our ad, assuming I have done this right, that we're now running digitally in Arizona to help organize and galvanize people. But let's see if this works.
Being a Republican used to mean standing for something, like honor, integrity, and the Constitution. A lot of us in the party think our leaders have lost sight of those values. But there's one man who stands for them. Captain Mark Kelly. He's a real fighter who isn't afraid of working across the aisle to get things done. It doesn't matter that he's a Democrat. He's a leader in the mold of John McCain. That's why I'm a Republican from Mark Kelly.
I love that ad. I think it captures it really well, but there's one thing I wanted to bring up because we put that ad out. We're running it digitally in Arizona right now, and we shared it. Our dear friend and compatriot in the fight, Miles Taylor, tweeted that out, and it got the notice of some of the MAGA and MAGA light crowd. One Kurt Schlichter was particularly enraged. And I thought it was funny. The line that I think most of these people got mad at was the call about bipartisanship and about a leader in the mold of John McCain. And there's just something, for people who, spent 4 years denigrating John McCain and then denigrating his memory, to take umbrage with that line. Just kind of shows how little they get exactly why Mark Kelly is like a John McCain.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think it highlights not only the importance of our work at Renew America to be a group of Republicans and former Republicans who say we value cross-partisan work, but it also highlights the importance at this moment of just how people have abandoned even trying to work together, and even the mention of someone who would set aside their partisan labels or their own preferences in order to try to actually work for the good of the country. That gets people riled up. And I think that tells us, unfortunately, a lot about where things are at in Arizona and in the country. But that means that it's just so important that we do this work. And so we hope to be, while we may be a minority of Republicans, we may in fact be the most important minority of Republicans, in the sense that we could be the difference makers in this race and in a lot of our races around the country, because there are a significant number of Republicans around the country who feel this way. Now, pundits like to say, oh, well, the Republican Party is still dominated by Trumpism. Look at these numbers, 85% still support Trump. That's true, except it really misses the political calculus of the 15% who don't, are a large enough mass in many, if not every close race, to make the difference. And so when you think about the power of that group and the power of a group like ours at Renew America, it really kind of highlights the importance of what we're doing and the power of what we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Arizona is one of those states that really typifies that, right? Like this is a state that has been, in the past, has been traditionally Republican. It's got, right now 2 Democratic senators, but a Republican governor. It is one of those battleground states. I was just actually Googling the results of the 2020 election in Arizona to make sure I got these numbers right. 49.4% Joe Biden, 49% Donald Trump. So this is a razor's edge kind of state that Mark Kelly's running in.
Well, and not only that, Mike, but it's become ground zero for disputing the election, of course.
Right.
Some of the biggest election deniers are in Arizona, and also, and it's not just, it's got a different flavor than some of the other states that are battling this out, in the sense that you've got some very strong, principled Republicans in very important election positions, like a Bill Gates in Maricopa County or a Stephen Richer, who have really kind of risen to national prominence for the very simple purpose of, I'm a Republican and I'm saying the election was not rigged. And so it's just ground zero for all this cauldron of stuff. And the shifting and changing and moving ways of these very close elections. I see Jim made a comment in Facebook about the re-registering, the shifting. That's totally accurate, Jim. There are people moving who are saying, I used to be a Republican, I've now become an independent. I'm actually in that camp. I was a lifelong Republican. I've been an independent since 2016, but there's a whole bunch of people doing that. And so those people don't always get counted in the political calculus. And so just shifting sands, and Arizona is a really key place. No pun intended on the sand.
Yeah. In Arizona, especially, I kind of refer to this group of people we're trying to reach as McCain and Goldwater Republicans, right? Because they are these people who stand up on principles, even when it's not particularly popular with some of their most ardent base, right? And that actually includes independents who were formerly Republicans, right? Because those are people who are doing that exact same thing, standing up and saying, no, I don't want to be a part of this. In Arizona, where you've got, Kelly Ward, Wendy Rogers, Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, Kerry Lake. I mean, that's a slate of candidates in Arizona running the Arizona GOP and vying for higher office. Some of them currently holding it. If I were an Arizona Republican, I don't know that I would want an R next to my name either. But those people are the kinds of people that we're trying to galvanize, who will join up and say, you know what? Enough with the crazy, enough with the election denying. We're going to go with a guy who has stood up and defended our democracy, stood up and said the elections were right, the elections were accurate, stop this nonsense, and who cross the aisle are willing to actually try and solve problems. And that's Mark Kelly.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, on Mark Kelly's front and then on his bio, when you look at people like Mark Kelly who have have really risked it all for the good of the country and for higher causes, whether it be his military career or his service to NASA. These are people who he doesn't need to be a senator, right? I mean, he's been everything that a man could want to be in his life, quite literally. And so I think that's really an important part of Senator Kelly's story, is that there are so many grifters out there right now who run for political office for their own fame, for their own glory, for their own wealth, in many cases. And we see that we see it on the left and the right, but it is particularly problematic on the right at this moment. And the reason they're doing it in many cases is because it's working. They're winning races and they're making a ton of money. They're raising a ton of money. And so we just think it's so important that on principle, we stand for people like Mark Kelly, and we put ourselves out there as Republicans and former Republicans and say, this is the right thing to do in Arizona this cycle.
I would add one more thing about his bio that I think, some people don't realize and some people forget is that he very nearly lost his wife to one of the early shocking cases of political violence in America, and that's Gabby Giffords, who was shot at an event in Arizona in the head, and miraculously, in my mind, survived and has recovered. So he's somebody who who understands that danger of political violence, and then post January 6th, right? The poor guy lived through that too, and it's just he gets it, right? He gets it on a very personal level, and that's and we can have confidence and trust that he's going to take that serious of political violence in any form by any party, and stand against it.
Yeah.
So I transition real quickly. I know we don't, as I said, we don't have a ton of time, but there's other big news that we've got to cover, and that is, we've talked before, I think, about some of our organizing and work in the state of Washington, supporting candidates like Jamie Herrera Butler, and we have a good friend, Chris Vance, who's been heading up that work for us, and Chris lives in a district that I guess has a pretty radical state senator. And Chris, a former GOP chair in Washington, decided, you know what? I'm not just going to lead these kind of efforts here. I'm going to stand up myself and run for office and try and unseat this radical Republican.
Yeah, it's great. We're really rooting for Chris. And if you haven't checked it out, he's Chris Vance in Washington. He's running for state Senate, and he's running as an independent. So in one case in Arizona, we're supporting a Democrat. We're supporting in Washington a Republican Congresswoman, Jamie Herrera Butler, who is facing some radical opposition in her primary, including this guy, Joe Kent, who is really cozy with Putin, and seems to love the whole concept of what's happening, unfortunately. And then you got Chris stepping into the fray as an independent. And though it's very hard to win as an independent in our political system, there is a level of openness right now among certain folks to not only vote for an independent, but to for some of the major party folks to stand down. Now, right now, that's primarily Democrats in races that they know they can't win in a general election. So the race that Chris has stepped into is one of those kinds of races that, because of gerrymandering over the years, many districts around the country are, what we refer to in political circles as R plus a lot, so Republicans have a double digit, sometimes over 20 digit, lead, and just, there's no way a Democrat can win that race. However, there is a way where if the Democrats either don't field a candidate or basically don't support any kind of very minor candidate, but put their weight behind an independent, particularly as someone like Chris, who's a former Republican and Republican Party chairman, to take on an extremist Republican, there is a real path to victory. And that's the case for Chris's race. So it's a great case study in this concept of independents running in very lopsided seats. We're certainly rooting for Chris as an organization. We're very grateful for him running, and he's headed up our federal level stuff for Renew America. But now he's really in the fray as a candidate there in Washington, running for state Senate. So way to go, Chris.
Yeah, if you're in the Washington area, especially in, I believe, the 31st Senate district in Washington, look up Chris. He's good folk. This does seem to be kind of a shift, to your point about Democrats kind of getting out of the way. This is a shift in political thinking among the Democratic Party. I don't know that I believe that the Republican Party has learned this lesson yet. I can't see an instance where they would voluntarily step aside to try. And for example, like they rage all day about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? But would they stand down Republican candidates to oppose her to support a moderate independent that could unseat her? I don't know, but I think Democrats learned, and I think most of the country learned the hard way, that this old mentality of thinking, well, if the worst possible candidate of my opposing party wins the primary, then I have a better chance of winning. And you realize with Donald Trump that anyone who wins the primary, and this is a lesson we should have known forever, anyone who wins the primary can then win a general. So you want to root for the best possible opponent from your opposing party. And sometimes that means, looking for creative ways to get somebody who may not be your preferred candidate, may not vote exactly how you want them to, but who's going to be better than the alternative. And I think we're seeing that with Chris Vance in Washington, and we're seeing in other places too. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to build is, people, hey, there's going to be a radical in your representing you. You can have a radical, or you can have a rational person that you can disagree with on a fundamental policy level, but who you can still trust to, not overthrow democracy.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's exactly right, Mike. And we're seeing this play in Utah with Evan McMullen, our good friend and co-founder. We're seeing this play emerging in Arizona in a House race there against Andy Biggs. So this is going to be a really important cycle to see if this experiment works. I'm very encouraged by the kind of momentum behind this play in a couple of places. And I think it's very viable. The numbers look good. The polling looks good in a lot of these races. So it's a time for some creative disruption, if you will, into our system. And we live in a system that is very, some people refer to it as the duopoly. That's kind of a boring, wonky word. But the reality is that the Republicans and the Democrats have a stranglehold on the system in many ways. But I think you're seeing, because of the importance of these races right now, people willing to take some really creative approaches. And I think it's good for democracy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's key. It's also why we're advocates for some of these electoral reforms, like ranked choice voting, or open primaries that lead to a ranked choice vote, things that allow independents, third parties to actually have a lane where they can compete. Because, quite frankly, Republicans and Democrats, well, the one thing they have a shared interest in is making sure that no one else comes and breaks up the party. So, I think it's key. Step one, though, is I think what we're doing, and that's changing the way that the American voter thinks about how to use their electoral power, and opening them up to, support an independent or even to support someone of the opposite party when their functional choice is, as we said earlier, a radical or a rational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and giving them permission to do that. I think if you talk to just about anyone, maybe not anyone, but I'll call it 80%. I'm pretty confident. They'll tell you, who do you vote for? They'll say the best candidate. But in practice, that's not how they actually do it. And so what we're trying to do is actually get them to live that out in their electoral choices, and to say, okay, great, let's go do that. And that may mean that in some races, you're going to have to cross party lines to truly vote for the best candidate. But just know that you're not alone. There are other Republicans making that decision. There are other conservative independents choosing to back a Democrat, for example. And you will get dinged if you say it publicly. I already got nailed when I released my side of the Arizona effort of Republicans for Mark Kelly, people attacking my faith, Christians don't vote for Democrats, that kind of thing. It's like, it's going to come. You just got to be ready for that. But that's the importance of the fight, is to be able to say, we're doing this on principle because we believe Mark Kelly is the best leader, and that's the choice we're going to make. Does that come with some understandings that we don't agree on everything? Of course it does. I mean, if you've ever been in a relationship of any kind, you should hopefully learn that you're not always going to agree on everything. And in a certain way, we need to practice that same principle in our electoral choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, if you want to find the politician you agree with 100% of the time, you're going to have to look in a mirror, because, and even then, maybe not. But politics is kind of an art of compromising on things that you can compromise on, right? And that's, for for some people, we've kind of lost that sense and replaced it with pure tribal identity. And so, you mentioned getting dinged on Twitter. I mean, Twitter's not real life, but we've all been there. And the number one thing that everybody always says about what we're doing, or says to me when I tweet something, is, oh, why don't you just become a Democrat? You're just Democrats now. No, I'm not. I like really, really not. I just have a different priority set, right? And that priority set is largely making sure that our democracy persists for another, couple hundred years at least. Make sure my son has that right to vote later, and it doesn't, his vote doesn't get overthrown by an angry mob storming a Capitol building, right? So, it's the source of that attack, you're just a Democrat. It's all part of that tribal mentality. Still, they're trying to beat you back into Democrat or Republican, while also just booting you out of Republican. But it's like, you gotta wash that, let it just roll off your shoulders, right? Because it's like, you know what? Okay, that's how you think. You think, well, you're R or you're D, you're nothing else. You're so trapped in that mindset. That of course you don't understand the project. Of course you don't understand what we're doing and why it's helpful for the country. But the people who understand are growing, and we're helping organize and mobilize them.
Yep, that's right. And it's encouraging. Day over day, we get outreach from people all around the country who say, "What can I do? How can I help?" They're giving small dollars. They're chipping in. They're joining up with our advisory boards and our Republicans for efforts. They're supporting these principled Republicans that we're supporting. So if you're listening and you feel like, I don't know what I can do, just number one, know you're not alone as a Republican or a conservative independent, perhaps, who is looking for a place where other people feel this way. But there are plenty of things to do. So if you haven't already, sign up with us at Renew America, renewamericamovement.com, and let us know what you'd like to do. You can email us directly, info@renewamericamovement.com, if you want to know more about us. We will respond. We monitor our emails, and though we get a lot of them, we want to help connect you with the movement and what is happening out here.
Absolutely. So we'll wrap up quickly here, because I want you to be able to get some lunch before you dive back into your work. I hope 5 minutes is enough, but but just a couple of quick things for the audience. One, we've got a Ram Chat coming up with Representative Matt Cartwright next week. Promises to be a great one. Make sure you tune in for that. Two, we have more Republicans for Work coming. It could be coming to a state near you. Looking at you, Pennsylvania, Virginia. There's stuff coming. And three, make sure you subscribe to all of our social channels, YouTube, Renew America Movement, Twitter, Renew America Movement, everything, Renew America Movement. Follow along, keep in touch. And hey, if you liked it, share it with your friends. Help us find and identify more of those Republicans who are willing to cross those lines and do what needs to be done to save the country. Thanks a lot, Joel, for joining us. Any last words?
Have a great day, guys.
All right. Have a good one, guys.